Good morning, everyone. Before we start, I would like to invite everyone to join me in a minute of silence in memory of our beloved rector, Professor Josep Rom, who sadly passed away last Saturday. Okay, let's begin with the ceremony. Today, Flavio, I have learned the lesson and I prepared something and I am not going to improvise, okay? It's a great pleasure to welcome you all to this new session of the IQS-Harvard Talks. Today we have the privilege of hosting Professor Joshua Greene. Thank you very much for being here from Harvard University. I think this is for you, not for me. A leading thinker whose work has deeply influenced how we understand the human mind, moral judgment, and I think it's very important in our tradition, the choices that define us. From the beginning of our history, IQS have believed that science and technology must always stay connected to the human dimension, and our two schools demonstrate that. This human dimension includes ethic, purpose, and meaning, and in that sense, Professor Greene's, Joshua, if you don't mind, research reminds us that progress is not only about what we can do, but about what we should do. This conversation between moral philosophy, neuroscience, and decision-making lies at the very heart of responsible innovation, something that we care deeply about here at IQS. We are honored to open our doors to such dialogue between Harvard and IQS, if you allow us, between two cities that I love very much, Boston and Barcelona, two communities that share a passion for knowledge, creativity, and impact. These encounters are not just about exchanging ideas, they are about inspiring us for the next generation of scientists, engineers, management leaders to think critically, please, to think critically, act ethically, and serve society. Professor Greene, Professor Flavio is going just to give a brief CV of you, but thank you again for being with us today. We are truly delighted to welcome you to IQS.
Now, the director is still here, and I can thank him for coming. He didn't listen anyway. He came from the middle of an important meeting just to give this welcome. So very grateful for that. I think I have to start by saying that it's a great honor. And it's a great honor to welcome Professor Joshua Greene from Harvard University, whose work has become a key reference and source of inspiration for many of us. We are also delighted to have Professor Inazi Cifre, the Vice Dean of the Faculty of Psychology of Blanquerna. We are very proud of being able to to do university, as we say here, who has kindly agreed to serve as his discussant, so to allow you some time before you formulate your own questions. Now, introducing Professor Greene's work is no simple task, and for good reasons. First, his research is profoundly interdisciplinary. Now, I can confidently say on broad lines that he is a leading figure whose pioneering contributions span experimental psychology, neuroscience, and moral philosophy. Now, it's a little bit more difficult, I should acknowledge, for instance, to delve into concrete details of how, for instance, I repeat that, the superior temporal sulcus, STS, or the left orbitofrontal cortex, OFC, unveils moral phenomena. So that's really more complicated, yeah. But we can appreciate the general purpose. Now, I would also say that secondly, and closely related, his work encompasses a remarkable range and depth of themes. To fully appreciate it, one must engage with the philosophical foundations of utilitarianism and Kantian ethics, while also possessing a solid grasp of neuroscience and statistical analysis. This unique combination of depth and range is what makes his scholarship so compelling and so exciting and so difficult to summarize in just a few words. He's renowned for pioneering the dual process theory of moral judgment, a model that illuminates the intersection of automatic emotional answers vis-à-vis controlled rational processes in ethical decision-making. His work is relevant to several areas, and now some people might say of psychology, perhaps, of neuroscience, but I dare to say of management too, such as ethical decision-making, leadership, organizational behavior, design of nudges and incentives, negotiation and promotion of cohesive corporate cultures, among other items. Now, some of his achievements are legendary. He was one of the very first to put people into an fMRI machine and watch what happens when they wrestle with life and death moral dilemmas. He is widely credited with founding the field of moral neuroscience. His work also suggests that our deepest moral principles might often be, and I'm going to use that from one of your papers, a secret joke played by our emotions. He provides robust evidence that when we argue about what is right, what is wrong, we are often rationalizing intuitive impulses, not reasoning from first principles. He also proposed a common currency for morality, a meta-framework called deep pragmatism, designed to help groups with fundamentally different values finding a way to cooperate. But I also wanted to emphasize that his ideas are not locked in an ivory tower. He has directly applied his research to create innovative tools like Given Multiplier, which uses psychological insights to make charity more effective, or perhaps the Tango, a game designed to literally rewire how we talk to people we disagree with. Now, Professor Greene has received numerous prestigious honors, including being elected a member of the Society of Progress at INSEAD, a fellow of the Schmidt Futures Foundation, and a recipient of the Reimagine Charitable Giving Award. He's also a fellow of the Society for Experimental Psychologists and the Association for Psychological Science. He's the winner of the SINE Prize awarded by the Italian Society for Neuroethics and Philosophy of Neuroscience, and recipient of the Stanton Prize, but this is only among other prizes. I think among all these distinctions, what he may value most is the recognition that he got from his students, being repeatedly voted the favorite professor by several Harvard College classes and receiving the Rosling Abramson Award for Excellency in Undergraduate Teaching. So what an honor, what a privilege for us with him today. Now, and I don't say this lightly. I'm almost getting close to the end now because you want to hear him. But I want to emphasize this point with you. Now, today's session may be one of the most significant sessions that we have ever hosted at IQS. And I don't say this lightly. Now, our institution takes great pride in its ethical principles and in its Ignatian pedagogy, an approach that champions learning through active engagement with challenging experiences rather than passive reception of ideas. But yet, critical questions remain. How do we close the gap between our ethical principles and everyday practice? How do we rise above the differences that, in part, stem from the privileged position we occupy? How can we become a force for connectedness in a world that feels increasingly polarized? How do we chart a path where our ethical commitments are firmly grounded in empirical evidence? And in doing so, how can we grasp the delicate balance between reason and emotion that shapes our moral judgments? Now, they might suspect that you address some of these issues. Yes, I hope they suspect and that we are able to motivate. Now, how can we literally engineer cooperation? Even more concretely, how do we bring our identity and mission? And I have seen our delegate here, Oriol Quintana, is here. So, Oriol, how do we bring our identity and mission into a laboratory? Now, Professor Greene's research offers, I would like to suggest to you, the vital link we have been searching for. From his early work on moral neuroscience to his latest studies on cooperation and democracy, his scholarship provides a blueprint showing that progress depends not on moral persuasion alone, but on deliberate institutional design. His work has pioneered the integration of ethics into experimental science and continues to shape the next generation of thinkers, cementing his role as a leading voice in understanding this architecture of human morality and cooperation. Now, we are deeply, deeply grateful to have him with us today. Now, welcome, Professor Greene. The floor is yours. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. This is definitely going to be a case where the introduction is much more exciting than the talk itself. I don't think I could ever live up to that, but I really am deeply honored to be here. It's just been a great joy just in the last 24 hours, getting to know a few of you, Professor Comim, and I'm looking forward to meeting many more of you, and to just be in this beautiful place and to learn more about your culture and your languages. And so thank you for giving me the opportunity to visit. It is very exciting to be here. And I don't think anything I could say could live up to that introduction, but I will tell you about a few new things that I hope you find interesting and useful for the things that you are working on, that you're attempting to do yourself. So the title of this talk is Engineering Cooperation. And I've had a bit of a shift in recent years that I started out in philosophy, and I got interested in moral dilemmas and moral thinking because I felt that if we have any hope of resolving philosophical dilemmas, we need to understand our own minds. We need to understand why our minds get tied up in knots and why one part of our brain says one thing and one part of our brain says something else. And maybe if we could understand those things, we could undo those tensions. And, in the last 5 or 10 years, and I think this maybe is especially in the United States, but in Europe and other places in the world, we're in a time of great challenge, that there is great sort of crisis in our institutions and in our democracies. And I felt a sense that I had to try to take what I know or what I think I know or what we think we know to try to solve some of these problems or make progress. And I'll say more about what I mean. So this is an attempt to be a bit of an engineer. I dare I say social engineering, but with a very light touch, not very draconian, and a way to try to use what we know to help us get along with each other better and understand each other better. Okay, So the work, let's see, and do we have, oh, look, letters. Okay. The work I'm going to describe, I'm going to describe two projects, and they're both being led by this incredible graduate student named Lucas Woodley, who has a background in economics and psychology and is now working with me as a graduate student, but he already functions like, he could run his own lab. He could run 3 labs. He's really amazing. And then this work was started, the Tango quiz game, which I'll tell you about, was started by another graduate student named Evan D. Philippus, who now works for Mr. Beast, if some of you are familiar. So he's out there in the world doing fun things. And then Shankar Ravi has been important in some of the technical sides of what we've been doing. And then all of this is in partnership with a group called the Global Development Incubator. This is a social impact tech incubator that has been invaluable in helping us figure out how to do some of the work we're trying to do out in the real world. Okay, so let's start from the beginning. What makes things go well? Well, if you want to try to answer that question, you might start by looking out in the world and asking, where are things going well? Since this is a business school, I'll start with things going well financially. You look around the world, there are places that are very rich and there are places that are very poor and there are places that are in between. And most people would prefer to be rich rather than poor. And that's at least a start in terms of what's good. But as a philosopher, maybe as a human, I think that it's not just about money. It's really about people's satisfaction with their lives, right? Where in the world are people saying, yeah, my life is pretty good of the best possible life for me is a 10, I'm at an 8 or a 9 or a 10. And where are people saying, no, this is really not as good as life could be. And when you look around the world at that map, it does tend to track pretty closely with income. That money doesn't buy happiness, and it's not the most important thing. But places that have more money tend to be places that have better education, have better healthcare, and as we'll see in a moment, have other aspects of life that are more conducive to human satisfaction. But to get a little closer to causes, what makes life go well, if you look around the world at political systems, the places where people are most satisfied with their lives and also places where people have more resources tend to be democracies, and they tend to be more stable democracies, right? And this suggests, correlation is not causation, but at least it suggests that democracy plays an important role. You might say it's the most important social technology that we have ever created for making human life go well on a large scale. In recent years, democracy has been in retreat, right? So this is a map of the relationship of different types of governments. So closed autocracies are red. So this is pure dictatorship. And then what they call liberal democracies are in dark blue. And in 1789, the world was all dictatorships, right? Or pretty close to it. And over the course of the next 2 or more centuries, democracy was on the rise and dictatorship, authoritarianism was in retreat. But in recent years, there has been a bit of a shift, that things have kind of stalled. And in fact, there are more closed autocracies today than there were a few years ago. So democracy is under strain, right? And I think this has to do with the world getting closer together and people trying to answer questions about, within each country, within regions, who is us? Who are we supposed to be? Are we all just going to blend and be one big people? Or are we going to be distinct peoples? Who do we want here? Who do we not want here? Who is part of our group? And these recent challenges, I think, are very much about those questions of identity and diversity within countries. So there are places where you see a shift towards more authoritarian governments, and there are places that we have thought of as largely democracies that are increasingly in trouble. So of course there is the war in Gaza and Israel, which is about 2 different people, in fact more than 2, attempting to share this small piece of highly valued land. There's in India, increasing tensions between Muslims and Hindus, and in the United States, where I growing up always thought of it as a safe, stable place. There is a sense of there is a sense that our institutions are under strain and in some ways breaking down. And this is from, of course, January 6, 2001. I assume you're familiar with what happened then. And on college campuses, we are, seeing students, fighting with each other, fighting with police in a way that we haven't seen in decades. And of course, in Europe, there have been big political changes. There's the rise of far right parties who think that Europe has gone too far in terms of being too open. So with immigration being the fundamental issue. And I should say here, I don't mean to presume what people's political views are here. And, I will say I'm personally not a fan of the rise of right-wing populism, but my job here is not to tell you what to think, but to show you some evidence about how the world is changing and how it could change differently. And if we disagree about issues of moral values, I would attempt to persuade you rather than saying this is good and this is bad. And I look forward to hearing your thoughts, including from people who might not share my political views. But at the very least, we can say that there's a kind of tension in Europe and in the United States that we didn't see 20, 30 years ago in terms of competing visions for what our nations should be like. And a lot of this, as I said, is it's about immigration. It's about diversity. It's about people of different backgrounds, different races, different religions, different cultures living together. And throughout the 20th century, diversity and democracy have tended to rise together. So the world has been becoming overall, not in the last few years, but overall more democratic. And the world has become more diverse in the sense that within nations, there's more variation in where people are coming from in terms of their religion, in terms of their race, in terms of their culture. So you might think that democracy and diversity go hand in hand, right? But there's a bit of a paradox here. And that is, if you look in a little bit of a different way, there seems to be a tension between diversity and democracy. And this is indeed, I think, the political tension that you are experiencing in Spain and that we're experiencing in the United States between diversity and democracy. So if you look at the democracies that are considered to be the most stable, the most well-functioning, the most inclusive, you have places. These ratings are coming from the Economist magazine's democracy index. You have places like Norway, Sweden, New Zealand, Canada, that at least the Economist gives very high ratings for the quality of democracy. But these tend to be places that are not very diverse. And here I'm measuring diversity in a special way, which is the size of the non-dominant group, where the dominant group can be defined in terms of religion or in terms of race or both. But in Norway and Sweden and New Zealand and Canada, it's mostly people who are white. It's mostly people who are Christian or coming from a Christian cultural tradition. And these are places that tend to be very homogeneous. To the extent that there is a lot of political disagreement, it's about immigration. It's about whether, bringing in more people, let's say, to Sweden who are not white Christian Swedes, but people coming from other parts of the world. And then you have places like South Africa, where a majority of the country is not part of the politically and economically dominant group. And here, of course, the divisions are defined primarily by race, but of course there are differences in culture and religion as well. Here we have Professor Comim's original country, which is a very diverse place. And the United States, and this is from a few years ago, is kind of here in the middle. And what you can see is that there's this sort of inverse relationship. That is, places where people are much more the same. It's easier, it seems, to have a stable, well-functioning, inclusive democracy, not so much corruption, people saying the system is unfair, I'm being excluded. And in places that are more diverse, democracy tends to be challenged. So we sort of have a paradox, because here, going back, let me try to go back to the old slide. It looks like democracy and diversity rise together, but here it looks like they are that they're opposed to one another. It looks like you can have You're healthy democracy if you don't have too much diversity, and if you have a lot of diversity, then your democracy is really challenged, right? So what's going on? Do these things go together? Do they fit together well, or is there a fundamental challenge? Some people might say even incompatibility. Might say you can't have both. And this is the first question that I want to address. And this is more in a kind of research in a more economics and political science style. So this is another new area for me. So first, the question is, what do we mean by diversity? And what's the kind of diversity that matters in terms of the success or failure of democracy? And you can think about diversity in at least two different ways. So one is in terms of what economists and political scientists call fractionalization. And if you want to have a measurement of fractionalization, what it really means is if you have a country and you randomly take two people, what is the probability that they belong to the same group, right? And so that's really about having more people in different groups, right? And so if you imagine this society here, now this is a more fractionalized group, because you have not just the red and the blue, but the red and the green and the blue. And if you draw two people randomly from here, you're more likely to get two different colors, more likely to get people from two different groups. Another way to think about diversity is in terms of the size, the proportion of the traditionally dominant group. So let's say in this country, the Reds were historically the ones in power, who had the money, who had the political control. Here, it's the same number of groups, but the dominant group is getting smaller, right? And this is how economists and political scientists have typically thought about diversity in terms of fractionalization. But if you're coming from psychology, you might think that what really matters in terms of the strain and the long-term success on a democracy, what really makes the difference is whether or not the traditionally dominant group feels that it is being threatened, feels that it is shrinking because there are more people from the outside. Whether or not it's one big group or a lot of different groups, that's not really what matters so much. What matters is the traditional dominant group retreating. And so our hypothesis is going to be that this declining dominance, not fractionalization, is the thing that really is the challenge for democracies. Okay. So to try to answer this question, and when I say we, I really mean Lucas Woodley. So we're looking at a bunch of different types of data. So we're looking at demographics. So in countries, what are the different groups and how many people are there? We're looking at political power. So we're taking this is a data set that tells you what types of people there are in different countries at different times. And then this other data set tells you which groups have more political power, who's the dominant group and who are not outside the dominant group. And then we have different measures of democracy. Now, I used the one from The Economist, but for the research, we're actually using ratings from this varieties of democracy scale, which has research experts evaluating each country in terms of the quality of their democracy and different ways in which democracies can be strong or weak. So we're taking these different separate data sets and we're putting them together to try to ask this question: what is the relationship between who's in a society and in what numbers, who has power historically and who doesn't, and how well is the democracy going? And we're looking at this for 90 different countries from 1950 to 2010. Now, you might say, well, why not all the world all the time? This was the period, and these are the countries where we had all of the different types of data that we needed. So this was the biggest data set that we could get, where we have everything we need for each country during the time period. And so then the question is, okay, how does democracy relate to different groups with different levels of power? And this is where, Lucas's economics wizardry comes in, teaching me things about how to do these dynamic panel models. The core idea is that, you're looking at these things over time. And, what a country is like in 1 year or 1 decade is related to how it was before. So you can't treat these things as unrelated events. You need statistical techniques that allow you to say, okay, if you see a difference in one period, is that likely to be the cause of something changing in the next period? And the idea is, using the fancy math, you can estimate. You can estimate whether or not what you're seeing now is being caused by events previously. And here, what we're going to be looking at is changes in the population and changes in the size of the group that has previously been dominant. Okay, so we're looking at the declining population share of the dominant group. So what happens? So the question here is, what happens when the dominant group starts to shrink? And in the United States and in many countries, in Europe, what this means is white people or white Christians. When that group gets smaller, what happens to the quality of the democracy? And this is controlling for many different things. So this is not, this is the output of a complicated statistical analysis. So what we see is that 10 years later, controlling for everything else, when the dominant group shrinks, gets smaller, you see a significant reduction in the quality of democracy. So this is like the graph I showed you, where every dot is a country, and the more diverse democracies are struggling, and the more homogeneous democracies, where people are more similar to each other, are doing well. That's consistent with this effect. But if you look 20 years later, a full generation later, you might say, those democracies are not only bounce back, but they're actually stronger. And this effect lasts. If you look 3 years later and even 4 years later, those democracies have been strengthened. And this is in terms of what's called egalitarian democracy, electoral democracy, which is really the most important, liberal democracy, and participatory democracy. So what this suggests is that we can put it this way. Oh, and I should add that if you do the analysis in terms of fractionalization, so this is how many different groups are there, and if you pick two people, are they likely to be in the same group or different group? If you do this analysis with fractionalization, you don't see this effect. But if you do it in terms of the size, the changing size of the dominant group, that's when you see this change. So one way to sort of summarize what's going on here is, first, diversity strains democracy. People say there are these new people. I don't like them. They're different from us. They don't share our culture. They're not part of us. And we don't feel comfortable with them. And we have to do things to make sure that they don't take over, that they don't take control. Right. But then, eventually, and it takes time, it seems. It takes about a generation. And this is similar to what some sort of social philosophers and historians have said. Robert Putnam, if some of you are familiar with his work, without a quantitative analysis, had this hypothesis as well. But after a generation or so, people say, this country includes many different types of people from different types of places. And, we all consider ourselves to be, part of the same thing, but it really does take time, but it does last. Now, this is, let's see, here we go. This has been true on average, looking at across many different countries, not everywhere. And this has been up until recently. So this data set goes up until about 2010, which is just before the recent changes that I described, where democracy seems to be in retreat, where it seems to be declining. So maybe this is no longer true. Maybe diversity and democracy can't go together anymore, right? Or maybe we are going through a kind of adolescence, a kind of difficult growing period, where democracy overall has been under strain, but eventually, diverse democracies will prevail. And, people may disagree about this. Some of you may think it's good if democracies don't get too diverse. I'm more of the view of a big us kind of person. You don't have to agree with me, but at the very least, I would like us to not be fighting about this and to respect and trust each other. And so the question that I have is, can we actively build democratic strength? Right? Can we take a country like the United States or Spain, where there are these tensions between different groups or people with different visions for what the country should be like? And can we learn to trust and respect each other better? Can we actively engineer a solution? Have a little water. And that is what I want to talk to you about for the rest of the talk. So as I said, in the United States, and I think elsewhere, it's really a question of how big is the us? How big is the we? You know, and one of my great inspirations for all of my work is the philosopher Peter Singer, who wrote this book in 1981 called The Expanding Circle. And he said, if you look over the course of human history, the moral circle, the person of, you know, who counts as worthy of moral consideration in people's minds, this has been expanding. In many very small scale cultures, the name for the group is also the same as the name for people, right? So there's us, our little group here, and then the individuals from the other side of the hill or across the river. They don't even count as human. So a very small us, right? Over time, we've come to identify, you know, with larger groups. So part of, you know, the genius of the world's great religions, like, you know, Christianity and Islam, is that strangers can be united, and feel like they are part of this same group, even though they don't know each other. So if you're Catholic, you can go to mass in a country on the other side of the world, and you know the words, and you can, you know, see those other people as part of your us, even though you've never met them before, even if in everyday life they speak a different language from you. So that's ethnic groups, and then we have nations that, you know, may span multiple religious and racial groups, and then finally we can expand to all of humanity and even consider, you know, morals other species. Some of you are probably vegetarians because you believe that it's wrong for humans to, you know, eat the flesh of other animals simply because we enjoy it, right? And once I was asked at a conference, I had to have, you know, your little name tag at the conference, and you had to put one line that was about like, well, what do you do, or what are you about? What's your thing, right? And I hadn't really thought about that. I hadn't, you know, that's even shorter than a tweet or an X post, right? Like, what is my thing? And what I decided was, I think my thing is expanding the circle of human cooperation and altruism. That's what I'm about. I'm not telling you you have to be about that, but this is what I see as the goal of my work. And in the United States, the question we're asking is, who counts as this us, right? How big is that us supposed to be? It's been very difficult. So I don't know if you know how bad it's gotten, but in the United States, this is a poll from last year. Nearly half of Americans said that they think that the people in the other political party, I don't just disagree with them, I think they're downright evil, right? So this is really fundamentally different from how things were 20, 30, 40 years ago, where you don't just sort of see the political opposition as, oh, you have different ideas about how to govern. I like big government. You like small government. It's more than, no, you're people who really, we can't trust and we can't respect. And that is a very dangerous thing in a democracy where people need to share power. This is the conservative activist Charlie Kirk, who was assassinated, who was killed a few months ago. Of course, this is January 6th. And on my own campus at Harvard, probably the single most divisive issue is the issue of the war in Gaza and in Israel. And this is a place where Harvard tends to be a fairly left-leaning campus. About 80% of people identify as some type of liberal. But even within that liberal group, there's significant disagreement about how to think about this. And this is Jimmy Kimmel, who's popular TV show host, and essentially the Trump administration tried to get him off of the air because they didn't like the things he was saying. So attacks on free speech. This was right after Charlie Kirk, essentially saying, okay, one of our guys was killed, so let's try to take this guy out, not kill him, but silence him. This is really very different from how things were when I was young, and a sign that, you know, the United States may really be in trouble. Okay. So what works? When I first started thinking about this, I thought, maybe I'll have some big new theory of conflict resolution and what brings people together. And I looked at the research in the social sciences and in the biological sciences, and the old theories pointed to the same thing. And it seemed to me to be pretty well supported by the research. And so I thought, we have this old theory. What do we need to do with it? So first, what is the old idea? The idea is essentially, biologically speaking, is that everything that we see around us in the living world is is a product of mutually beneficial cooperation. That is, parts working together and able to do things that they couldn't do separately. So in the beginnings of life, molecules come together and form cells, and cells form more complicated cells, which form colonies and organisms and socially cooperative organisms. And then humans are organisms made up of cells, and humans themselves cooperate in small groups and larger groups. And, we live in a world in which we're cooperating and trading with each other across oceans and continents, right? And the thing that makes all of this work, what keeps it going, is that teamwork is effective. That the individuals and the societies that work together are able to survive and outcompete groups that do not cooperate as effectively. So what the biology suggests is that if you have two different groups that are fighting with each other, the best way to bring them together is to have them work together in a way that produces benefits and have that benefits shared, right? Now, I'm speaking to you at a business school, and that may seem to be very, 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 very obvious. But this is not always the way that social scientists and political activists tend to think about these things. At least not in the U.S. I don't know about here. Okay, on the social science side, similar answer. So there's a famous theory called the contact theory, coming from Gordon Allport, who was in my psychology department many decades ago. And it's a pretty intuitive idea, which is that if you have groups that are at odds with each other, you need to bring those people together, but not just under any circumstances. A war is literally bringing people together, but to fight with each other, right? You need to have people brought together under the right conditions that are essentially conducive to cooperation. And there are other sort of classic social scientific theories and bits of evidence. And really, we see this in the evidence of this all around. So in the United States, one of the biggest divides, a defining division in the United States is, with our legacy of slavery, is the divide between racial divide between white and black. And there was a time, during World War II, the U.S. was fighting, of course, and they needed more men. And there was this question about whether or not white soldiers and black soldiers could work together in the same units. And many people thought, no way, this would never work. But they decided to try it, and it worked extremely well. That having people, have that shared cause, I hate to say it, but shared enemy can really bring people together, right? And this was a powerful impetus for the civil rights movement in the United States, that when the black soldiers came home from the war and say, okay, we fought side by side with you, and it's time for us to have the right to vote and to be treated as full citizens. And we are still fighting that fight in the United States, but we have come a long way. And this cooperation is an important part of that. We also see this in sports. Sports teams, above all, what they want is to win, right? And that means you want the best players, regardless of whether they're black or white. And so the military and sports were places where there was advanced integration before the rest of society, because there was a clear goal and a clear need and benefits to people working together across those lines. But really, every modern city is a testament to the possibility that people from different backgrounds, cultures, and races and religions can work together and see each other as partners rather than as enemies to be feared and distrusted. But so, this is the background theory that teamwork is what works, right? So then if this is it's pretty common sense, I think, especially at a business school. And it's not a new idea. So then the question is, if we know that this is the answer, suppose that's right, why are we still facing these challenges decades after, these ideas were well articulated and ideas that really people have appreciated for centuries? I think of it as it's not so much a matter of having new fundamental social science or biological science. It's a matter of engineering. That is, we know that cooperation across lines of division can arise organically when circumstances are conducive, when there's a war and we need to work together or we're both going to die, right? Or there's a sports team and we need to play together or else the other team's going to win, right? Those are circumstances where cooperation across differences happens naturally. But how do you engineer it? Where there are forces that are opposing it, right? That's the question that I'm going to try to begin to answer. So, come on. Let me see. Can you, whoever's on my clicker's not working. Whoever's at the computer, can you? Yes. Oh, we're back. Okay. So here we go. I'm not sure what. So what are the things we need to engineer cooperation? Come on, this way. There we go. Well, we need things that are effective. And if the theory that I'm pointing to is right, then these are going to be programs, systems that put people from opposite sides onto the same team. And there is evidence that this can work. So, I'll just to name a couple of programs that operate on this principle. So Braver Angels is a group in the United States that brings Republicans and Democrats, the people who think each other are evil, together in a kind of cooperative dialogue environment. And there's research suggesting that when people participate in this, they have positive attitude shifts towards the other side. They don't necessarily agree with what the other person says, but there's less animosity and more respect. Seeds of Peace is a program that has been around for decades in Israel, Palestine, which brings Jewish and Arab Palestinian youth together, and they actually go to a summer camp in Maine in the United States. And have dialogue, but also have cooperative activities. And again, research shows that this program can be effective. But there are two really big limitations with these types of programs. So first is the problem of self-selection. So the people who are going to say, okay, I'll come and participate in this dialogue group, or I'm going to fly, to Maine to spend time with the enemy, right? That those people are already very open-minded, right? If everybody was like the people who sign up for these programs, we wouldn't have these problems in the first place, or certainly not on the same scale. The other problem is the problem of scale, right? That you can't send the entire region of Israel-Palestine to a summer camp in Maine, right? You can have a few people participate. Now, the metaphor of Seeds of Peace is, let's say, well, you have the seeds, right? Get created in this special environment in this summer camp, and then the seeds get dispersed, and then they will grow and flower. But that's not what actually tends to happen, right? How many of you remember the idea? We learned a lot of epidemiology during the pandemic, and one of the ideas that you may have encountered is this idea of R naught. I don't know how you'd say it in Spanish, but this is the parameter, the number that epidemiologists use as their indicator of whether or not something is going to spread, whether it's going to go viral, like literally a virus or something else, or whether it will fade away, right? And what it means for R naught to be higher than 1 is for every one person who gets the thing, so it's a disease or an idea or whatever it is, more than one person gets it as a result. So 1.2 people, on average, right? And if R naught is greater than 1, even if it's just a little bit greater, then it grows, right? And if R naught is less than 1, even if it's just a little less than 1, 0.98, then it fades away, right? And the problem with the Seeds of Peace model is that it's not distinguishing between an R naught of 0 an R naught of 0.9 and an R naught of 1.1. That is, what I mean is the seeds, the people who participate in these programs, they may do good things out in the world and they may really have an influence, but the influence fades. It doesn't go viral. The seeds don't create more seeds and more seeds and more seeds. And, we have a epidemic of peace, right? Instead, we have a few good people who get to know each other and they tell their family and friends, and their family and friends say, well, that's good. I feel a little bit better, at least before the latest bombing or whatever it was, right? And then things fade out. So you need things that have the capacity for larger scale, and you need to avoid the problem of self-selection, that the people who participate are already the people who are doing okay in terms of their mindset. So, how do we do this? Oh, there we go. So we need solutions that are scalable. What does that look like? Well, not everything that's scalable in the technical sense actually works. So this was a famous study done by Christopher Bale and colleagues where they said, in the United States, the problem is that people are inside their media bubbles. They only hear what their friends think and they don't hear what the other side has to say. So what we need to do is get people outside of the bubble. We need people to hear what the other side is saying, right? So they did this experiment where they had Republicans sign on to get tweets. This was back when it was Twitter, from a Democrat bot that would retweet things that Democrats are saying. And the Republican would get to hear, I assume everybody knows the basics of American politics, Republicans, Democrats, okay, good. So Republicans would hear what the Democrats are saying, and the Democrats would hear what the Republicans are saying. And that maybe this will wake people up and, open them up more. And what they found was that when the Democrats heard what the Republicans were saying, it had no effect on their attitudes. And when the Republicans heard what the Democrats were saying, it made them like Democrats even less than they did before. So overall, it either did nothing or it backfired. Merely having people hear what the other side is saying doesn't help. Now, Twitter may not be the best environment. This may not be the best messages for persuasion and opening one's mind. But at the very least, this was a plausible hypothesis, and it turned out to not work as intended. So recently, Jan Volkel and Rob Willer and other colleagues at Stanford ran this project called the Strengthening Democracy Challenge. And what they said is, okay, all of you psychologists, economists, political scientists, sociologists, practitioners, give us something, anything, 8 minutes that you can put in front of people that will make them have less negative attitudes towards their political opponents, maybe less support for political violence, or more support for working together. And let's see what works. We'll try it out in a controlled experiment. So they got 200 proposals, and then they narrowed it down to about 25 of them that they thought, were most different from each other and most likely to work. And they ran a giant experiment where they had all 25 of these things. And it could be videos, it could be websites people go to, just things that people read, whatever it is. And they found that there were, a fair number of things that could have an immediate positive effect. That, you watch this video about political violence and people say, okay, I'm less supportive of political violence after watching that video, compared to a control condition where they're doing something else. Almost all of the things that worked had no effect 2 weeks later, that the effect was done. So it's not lasting very long. But there were a couple of things that had positive effects that lasted even 2 weeks. So that's good. And this paper came out in Science. Science and Nature are the two, most important scientific journals. And it was, and rightly so. This was a big, landmark study. But the result was some things that work a little bit, 2 weeks later. But that's a big improvement over nothing. And these are things that are scalable because they're digital. You can put them in front of everybody. But there's another piece of this. It's not enough to have things that work and that can work at scale. There's a motivational aspect to this as well. Come on. I don't know if there's magic words to say.
Probably the direction.
Direction?
Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah. Who's on the computer? Is there someone who can just hit the button?
Yeah, probably over there.
Oh, there we go. Maybe I just have to hit it really hard. Okay. So you have to be motivated. So motivation is the other piece of this, right? That you can have a video about political violence that when people watch that video, it makes them say, at least for a couple of weeks, okay, maybe political violence is not as good idea as I thought. But how many of you wake up in the morning or, after a long day say, I want to watch a video about the dangers of political violence, right? Probably not, right? It's eating your boiled vegetables, right? So it's not enough to have things that work and that millions of people could do. You need some motivation. You need people you need things that people want to engage with, right? You need to use carrots rather than sticks. And so one way to put this question is, what is the opposite of highly engaging, divisive online content? What's something that shifts people's attitudes in a positive way? It's digital, so millions of people can do it, or it can achieve scale. And it's something that people actually enjoy or would be motivated to engage with, right? The opposite of online trolling that makes people hate each other and spreading misinformation and distrust and disrespect. What is the thing in the middle there? So this is the question that I and my team, we tried to answer. And come on.
You think I can help you here?
Oh, does that go? Oh, good. Okay.
Yeah.
Just I'll come there. Is a game called Tango. So what is this? And this is a game that we created where it's a quiz game that you play online with a partner. And so what happens is you log on to the game, it asks you some questions about yourself, and then you get paired up with someone. And in the interesting case, you're paired up with someone who's different from you. So in the United States, this could be you're a Democrat, you get paired with a Republican, or you're a liberal, you get paired with a conservative. But this can be done in other places, as I'll mention. And you have to answer questions together. And there are really sort of two types of questions. So some of the questions are just about popular culture. So it's about music and food and TV show and TV shows. And we're taking advantage of the fact that in the United States, Republicans, Democrats, liberals, conservatives, they know about different things. They like different things that are not about politics. So this question here, which country artist had the highest selling album of 2023 in the US? Raise your hand if you know the answer. Any American country music fans here? Not sorry. What? Okay. Well, if I ask you at Harvard, you might not get many people who knew either. So the answer is Morgan Wallen. This is something that Republicans would be likely to know the answer to, right? But if you ask about the show Stranger Things, any of you seen Stranger Things? Of course, right? I saw an advertisement yesterday. McDonald's has like a Stranger Things lunchbox, right? So it's the same thing here, right? So liberals, Democrats are more likely to be able to answer questions about Stranger Things, whereas Republicans are more likely to answer questions about Morgan Wallen. So Republicans and Democrats, you play this game together, and the Democrat says, "Oh, I know, her name is 11. 11's a person's name? Yes, that's her name." Okay, and you do that, for Stranger Things, but the Republican knows about Morgan Wallen. You work together, you get your points, you get your money, you get your prizes, and that's good. So that's pop culture questions. But then we also have questions about politics. So in the United States, we got a lot of guns. Not as many. You don't have as many guns as we have, and we have nice big guns. And if you're a liberal, you're likely to think that the big guns, the assault weapons, the military guns, kill lots and lots of people. But in fact, it's actually, of all of the gun deaths in the United States, and there are a lot more in the United States than there are here, unfortunately. Well, fortunate for you, unfortunate for us. Very few of them are actually involve these big military weapons. But when there's a mass shooting with the big weapons, then that's all over the news. Maybe you hear the news also, and you say, "Oh, I'm never going to the United States again," because they've got all these. You show up in the country, and there are people with military weapons pointed at you. People on the left think, "Oh, these giant guns are killing everybody," but it's not good, but it's relatively few, and so Democrats think 30%, 40% of gun deaths are from these big military weapons, whereas Republicans would say, no, those are very rare. It's mostly handguns. But if you ask about crime rates among immigrants, and you say, do immigrants commit more crimes than native-born Americans, Republicans will say, oh yeah, 10 times as high. And Democrats will say, no, it's actually not that much. And in fact, immigrants in the United States commit fewer crimes per capita than native-born Americans. So this is a place on a sort of political issues, guns, Democrats. So that the Democrats are wrong about assault weapons and how many people they kill proportionally, but Republicans are wrong about immigration and how many immigrants commit crimes. So we start out with the stuff that's easy and fun, country music, Stranger Things. You get to know each other. You work together. I know this, you know that. It's nice. And then when things get political, you go, really? Okay, well, I'm a little surprised, but you're already teammates. You're already working together. You're already winning money. And it's very hard to dislike somebody who you're working with, who you like and who's friendly and who you're working with successfully, right? So the idea is to create this experience of teamwork, like being on the same baseball team, or like being in the same military unit. And the idea with the political questions is that when you have to deal with the political things, you not only like the person you're playing with more, but it generalizes to the rest of the group, because it makes you think about the fact that you don't just say, well, it was nice when we were talking about music, but once things get political, then you're going to turn into a monster. Right. And what you see is that even when it becomes about guns and immigration, the other person doesn't turn into a monster. And by the way, this is true. So when we started doing these experiments, we didn't know what would happen. We didn't know if there were all going to be all of these fights and people would start screaming and swearing at each other and saying nasty things. Very, very rare. These things tend to go well, and people tend to be pleasantly surprised by how it goes. Okay, so that's an informal description, but let me show you some data. So this is a map of this is from our paper that we published this summer, and in our fifth experiment, we had over 1,000 Republicans and Democrats play this game. So you can see the red is Republican, blue is Democrat, and people who are being connected all over the country playing this game with different partners. These are some of the results. So we use what's called a feeling thermometer. So we ask people on a scale of 0 to 100, how cold or warm do you feel about Republicans? Do you feel about Democrats? And people typically, not always, but on average, the numbers are on the bottom half of the scale. So they feel pretty cold. And what we find is that when people play the game with someone who is politically different from them, from the other side, you could say they feel warmer towards the other side, but really they feel less cold. And what we find is that immediately after the game, you get an increase in warmth or reduction in cold of 9 degrees. And you say, well, what is 9 degrees? 9 degrees is the equivalent of going backwards 15 years in time, rolling back 15 years of increased animosity. So a very big effect in terms of the immediate effect of playing with someone who's different. Now, of course, this isn't magic. It doesn't last forever. A month later, we still see an effect, but it's small. A week later, a month later, and even 4 months later, we're still seeing an effect. In this data set, it's not significant. In other ones, it is. But we find that this effect lasts 4 months from playing this game once. It's a pretty long game. We have them play for 45 minutes, so they really kind of get into it. But this is, not just 2 weeks, but 4 months later, people feel less negative towards the other party. We also do this with money. So we say, we're going to divide $100 between a random Republican and a random Democrat. How do you want to divide the money? And some people will say, give it all to the Democrat, or give it all to the Republican, my party, my people, right? Some people will say, no, be fair, split it 50-50. And then people will do different variations. Some people will say, give more to my party, but not nothing to the other, to the other party. And what we find basically is that even 4 months later, when people, we follow up with them, when people played with someone who is different from them, they're more likely to split the money 50-50 between a Republican and a Democrat. All right. And we find it has effects on other things. So people are more likely to say the other side can make valid points, and more likely to say that they think that, we should, we're willing to support candidates that are in favor of finding political compromises. All right. And the thing that really seems to make it work, this is the secret sauce, as we say in the United States. I don't know if that's an expression here, is mutual respect. In the world of sort of dialogue, people often are very focused on empathy and, I feel your pain and tender feelings. And that can be very, very important. But what we find when it comes to this divide, at least, respect is the thing that really seems to drive the effect. That what makes people say, okay, I don't hate you as much, is when you feel like you respected me. When I knew something that you didn't know, instead of saying, well, that's wrong, and you don't know anything, you accepted that I might know something that you don't know, even about guns, even about immigration, right? And that sense of mutual respect of saying, okay, you knew some things that I didn't know, and I knew some things that you didn't know, and we both had valuable things to contribute. That mutual respect is what is, statistically is connected to the positive effects that we see. Also, if people enjoy the game and they feel like they were successful, and if they see their partner as being not just an exception, but typical of the other group. And we get these great comments from people. So red is Republicans and blue is Democrats. So we have a Republican saying, I love this experiment. It gives me further hope that we can work with others no matter what divides us. And then I love this one from a Democrat. I enjoyed the F out of this experiment, possibly the coolest one I've done in my many of these online experiments. We get lots of comments like this. Okay. Now you might say, I get this question more at home, maybe not so much here. Why should we care about people's feelings? So you say, okay, so you make people like each other a little bit more or dislike each other a little bit less. But so what? Well, what really matters is these people who are doing these violent things, murdering Charlie Kirk or trying to get Jimmy Kimmel off the air or storming the Capitol on January 6th. It's not just about feelings. We need to really address political violence and corruption. But the way I think about it, and there's research to support this, is, we have these, violent political storms, right? But the storms don't exist in isolation. So the way a hurricane works is, hurricane is a very visible, violent thing, but it feeds off of this warm sea, right? And even a small changes in the temperature of the ocean can have a big effect on whether or not you get those storms. And so the way I see to reverse the direction of the metaphor was warm is good or warm is bad, is that if we can turn down the temperature on the political heat and increase the temperature on political or social warmth, that the violence that we're seeing more of and the distrust and the disrespect that is damaging to democracies, that the key to reducing those really salient, damaging events is a broader change in the culture, not where everybody agrees with everybody necessarily, but where people don't see the other person as the enemy, where they don't see someone as not worthy of respect or not worthy of any kind of trust. And so we need to work on the sea of people's feelings and emotions about the other side. Okay, so in the last year or two, we've been working on taking Tango out and bringing it into the world. So the first place where we tested this was actually at another business school. This was the Dyson School at Cornell University, which is the undergraduate business program there. And this is good because there's more political diversity there than like the rest of Cornell and a lot of other schools like Harvard where I teach. And here we're looking at students not by political party, but by liberal versus conservative. And what we find is that when you have mixed groups, when you have two students who play together who are politically different, I'm liberal and you're conservative, people are more likely to say that, okay, both liberals and conservatives can make valid points after playing. And we even see a little bit of an effect just from playing the game, even with someone who's like you, in the control condition here, where the two people who are playing are the same. We also see across the board an increase in people saying, I'd like to get to know people who are different from me. And then this is sort of important for the growing viral, for the growth, is people really enjoy the game. So this is a histogram of enjoyment. And you can see, these are the people who hated the game here. So, 0, 1, 1 or 2. But by far the most common rating for the game was 10 out of 10. They really like it, right? And it's not like Fortnite. Like it's not like a high-tech game with awesome graphics and music and stuff like that. But what makes the game fun is the questions are interesting, and you have this experience of of connecting with someone who's different from you in a way that feels safe and in a way that feels productive and where you feel like you really sort of learn something. And I think that that's what really sticks with people. We also try to look at people's behavior. So, not just what people say, I like them a little bit more, but are you willing to take a personal step with a little bit of a personal risk? So we say, do you want to share your contact information to meet your partner? And if you both share your contact information, then we'll connect you and then you can go talk. And we found that most students, including the ones who were in the pair with someone who's politically different from them, shared their contact information. We did this at the University of Missouri, which is a state school, so a bit different culturally from a place like Cornell in the middle of the country in the Midwest, and got similar results there. And we started to do this in businesses. So these are results from a Fortune 500 firm. So this is an investment management firm, and we see the same sort of thing. And so this is the main result here is that at this company, this pilot test, people who played with someone who's politically different, again, more likely to agree that both sides can make valid points, more interested in getting to know people who are different. And these people really like the game. I think they were not expecting to have any fun. This was like at a corporate retreat, and I think this is, part of what's going on with the students as well. But the people who played really enjoyed this. Okay. And we added another measure here. This is how comfortable do you feel voicing controversial opinions? That there's a sense at work and in universities that people feel like they can't really speak their mind, right? And at Harvard, I'll get to this in a moment, is particularly for students who are more conservative, they feel like they have to kind of be in the closet and keep quiet about their conservative views, or the liberal students around them will hate them and won't go on dates with them and things like that. At Harvard, we did another model where we're not just having everybody in a room, but having people play in different places. So we did a big game this spring where people played on the app across 11 dining halls at Harvard at the same time, and that worked really well. So we see increase in our valid points measure, interest in getting to know people, and then also in increased comfort voicing controversial opinions. And again, the people who played the game really liked it. Oh, and to motivate people, we give away Harvard sweatshirts, and then the top prize was Celtics playoff tickets. So going to the basketball game. So, gotta bring people in and give them a reason to play. But this worked really well. And, you can see some of these chats here. I don't know, this is like, not random selection, but people really get into the game and they really like it, and they really like their partners. All right. So we're now working on getting this into lots of different schools, and across the board, we're finding that people are more likely to say that they, the other side can make valid points. I want to get to know people who are different from me, and the enjoyment ratings tend to be high. 10 is the most, and then for some reason, people don't like to give a 9 rating. They'll I guess they like to round up. So they'll say they'll give a 10 or an 8, but not a 9 very often. Interesting. Sort of the marketing experts can tell me why you don't get as many 9s, but we're working on getting this into different schools. And then I'll just tell you about the biggest game that we've done recently. Come on, this way. So we did at the orientation event, the start of the school year in August, September at Harvard with the incoming students. So this is over 1,000 students. This is a quarter of the class in the biggest or the second biggest auditorium on campus. So we had over 1,000 students play the game. And we saw, again, increase on all of our key measures. And the one that to me is, I think, most important is when liberals played with conservatives. And there aren't that, it's about 20% conservative people identify as conservatives at Harvard. So in those mixed pairs, the liberals have, this is playing the game for 15, 20 minutes. They have a 7-degree increase in warm feelings towards the conservatives. And this is really important to think that the conservatives who played with liberals say that they feel more comfortable voicing their opinions, right? And that's, on a college campus where we need to be able to discuss ideas and have the sort of educational underpinnings of a healthy democracy. If people feel like they can't say what they really think, that's a problem. And so just playing the game for 15, 20 minutes makes conservatives and liberals also feel more comfortable saying what they think. So this is these are pictures from the students playing the game, and then we had a discussion after the game. So this is sort of, raising their hands and discussing how things with your partner, what went well, what didn't, and those are really interesting. To motivate people to play, we had them. The prizes were going to a Red Sox game, so we had about 20 students whose winning teams went to a Red Sox game together. So baseball, and most students liked the game. 80% of people gave their contact info. And then over 100 students met up in the dining hall a week later to meet their partners. So you have people really going out and doing things in the real world and not just answering questions. And we got lots of positive comments, people saying that they really enjoyed the game, and hopeful for business purposes. I'd play this for fun outside of school with my friends. So maybe we can get this to take off. Okay. So we are working on versions of the game for Israel, and this would be Jewish and Arab students within Israel. So a lot of people don't know this, but Israel's 80% Jewish, but 20% not Jewish, mostly Arab. So it's not just Israelis here and Palestinians over there. Within Israel, there's a significant minority of Arab students, and that's where we're beginning to work. In India, the game focused on the Hindu-Muslim divide, and in Northern Ireland, focused on the legacy divide between Catholics and Protestants. There, Come on, you want to do it? Yeah, thanks. Yeah, go. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. So we're working on building an online version. The big challenge with the online version is you need to have people at the same time, and people won't wait more than a few seconds for a game partner. So of course we have to build a bot that can play with people for a little bit, but we can take the bot and we can train it on the data from thousands of transcripts of real Republicans and real Democrats, or real liberals and real conservatives playing with each other. So it's a bot, but it's kind of authentic. What we'll say is that when you play with the Democrat bot, you're playing with the voice of 1,000 real Democrats that have been put into that machine, or 1,000 real Republicans. So we're working on building this, and the hope is people would play with the bot for a little bit, and then a real human partner comes along, and they can play with the human, or they can sign up for games with real humans. And our ultimate goal is to have millions of people play this in the US and other places. We are working on a version for the workplace, and we think that there could be a real business purpose here. So when we talk to businesses, we find people in HR who really like the idea. And then they talk to the boss, and the boss says, this sounds risky. Politics in the workplace, not so good. And also, how's this going to help our bottom line? We think that this game can also just work for employee engagement. And you have a lot of remote workers who don't feel very connected to their companies, and just playing the game with other people in the company, even if it's just about TV shows and sports and things like that, that can help bring people together and create more of a sense of community. So we think that there is a employee engagement bottom line argument for doing this, and it can have social benefits, but we're working on sort of showing that that's the case. So Tango in the workplace, and then this is the most fun, but probably a long shot. Come on, got it. Thank you. I have a colleague who's created a pilot episode of a game show based on Tango, and we've had some discussions about whether or not we could get this as a game show out in the world. So okay, thank you. Yeah, so that's it. So oops, did that go? What this really is about, as I said, is about pushing the democratic frontier. That having a world in which people are different religiously, racially, culturally, it's a challenge. It's a challenge living together. Now, some people say it's a challenge and we should avoid it. I disagree with those people, but you're entitled to your opinion. But for those of you like me who want to see people, the circle expanding, right? That people from different backgrounds being able to live happily together in healthy, inclusive democracies. What we're really trying to do is to get up into this corner of the space where we can have diverse democracies that function as well as everything functions in Sweden and Norway. So we've got our little hopeful Tango rocket trying to get to this corner of space in the United States, and perhaps in Israel and India, and that is what we are trying to do. And let's go. So again, this is Lucas is the one who's really leading this work now, and Evan is the one who got it started. And these are our collaborators at the Global Development Incubator that's been helping us with sort of the development and business side of this, and some of our international advisors. And these have been some of the people who have supported the work that we're doing. And I'll leave it at that. So thank you very much, and I look forward to your comments and to hearing your thoughts about this. a better slide.
Very good. Now, thank you so much. Now, I first would like to invite Professor Ignacy Cifri for raising some initial considerations, and then after that we can open to your questions. So, thank you so much for being with us. So, it's a joy to have you here. Thank you. Yeah.
Hi. Sorry. Thank you. That's really difficult to be me now. So it's very because you now have time to think about your questions, but I need to look like I'm smart, and I'm astonishing with my notes, and I'm not gonna follow them. That's been a really interesting talk. Thank you so much. That's really that has a lot of impact on me because I'm a neuroscientist, so I'm not too much on that. I was expecting to talk about interparietal sulcus and
Ask about that. Ask about
and insula, but that's okay. That's okay. No, it's nice because yesterday I was talking to with a student, and the student was saying me, how can we deal with how can we put neuroscience in the real world? And I know we are not talking about this now, but the whole curriculum of Dr. Greene is going this way. And okay, I'm going to follow my good. I have some curiosities about the talk that you did today. Some of them are purely curiosities because I don't have the knowledge to make them as real proper questions. Okay, but when you were talking about cooperation in biological world, not human, not dressed primates world. You were talking about. I was thinking on a bird flock, and cooperation. Usually, when back on 20 years ago, we were talking about emerging phenomena, like a bird flock, which they are cooperating, but they are not conscient cooperating to obtain emerging cooperation. And I was thinking, looking at your or listening to you, I was thinking about is cooperation fully natural, irrational? Is purely non-conscient behavior? Is rational behaviors blocking cooperation somehow? That's my first question.
May I help only? So may I take the freedom here, because he actually had the first question, but I think he was shy. So and if I want to push on that, so what are when you are talking about the contact theory, when you are talking about how people react to games, what are the neurological processes that you might assume that are behind that? Because we know your work on the links between emotions and reason. So would you say is that because people see the evidence and they put a kind of utilitarian frame, the person knows the evidence, he knows the number, I have to respect that person because the person in a rational way I should respect that person? Or do you think they are processes related to how emotions and connections are established? Perhaps. So what I mean to say is that I think you have a question there, so don't be shy. And I think it's very interesting to understand what are actually all these processes that, for instance, moral tribes you have described, and and if you are actually concerned about that. So I just wanted to add, you had your question too, but for your question one, I simply want to say, don't be shy. So to put to you that.
Great.
So thank you.
Thank you then.
Yeah. So I think maybe address both of the questions at once or in an integrated way. So let's talk about sort of the brain and moral dilemmas for a second. So the work that people kind of who've been in the field for a while that they think of when they think of me is work on moral dilemmas. So raise your hand if you've heard of trolley problems, where you can kill one person to save 5 people. If that sounds so, some of you, so the younger people with the memes, So I got interested in this coming from moral philosophy, that there were these little sort of toy, sort of fruit fly kinds of problems, like trolley is headed towards 5 people, and you can turn the trolley away onto a different track, but then it will run over 1 person instead of 5. Or you can push somebody in front of the trolley, and it'll stop the trolley, and then save 5 people. And what's interesting about these dilemmas, especially the sort of footbridge case, so this is where you push somebody off of a bridge. Is this not going? Okay. There's a kind of tension between an emotional response and a more reasoned response. So emotionally, if you ask people who are not psychopaths, is it okay to push somebody off of a footbridge in order to save 5 people? People, they either say no, or they say yes very reluctantly, that there's a kind of feeling that this is wrong. And that's good. We don't want people to feel okay about pushing people off of footbridges, right? But then, this can be a case where like more people will die if you don't do this, right? Now, of course, this is a very sort of stylized hypothetical case, but it's a nice sort of way to sort of get at this tension between reacting emotionally and thinking kind of more rationally, or at least in terms of consequences, right? With these sorts of dilemmas. Oh, and then in terms of what's going on in the brain, what you have is when people sort of think about pushing somebody off of the footbridge, you see an increased response in a part of the brain called the amygdala, which is the same part of the brain that you'd see a response in if you're walking along and you see a snake, and for a second you're startled, right? It's a signal of threat, of danger, or need to pay more attention, right? In terms of doing their cost-benefit reasoning, saving 5 lives versus 1 life, that involves a set of circuits that includes what's called the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. So it's essentially the part of your brain that is active when you feel like you're working and thinking hard, and you're trying to sort of keep a lot of sort of things in mind and move them around. And then when there's a difference between those two responses, they kind of compete. And the way they compete is they send signals to a part of the brain called the ventromedial prefrontal cortex that integrates those signals. And, you have a response that says, don't push the guy. That's terrible. That's wrong. That's murder. And then another voice that says, well, but 5 lives, it's better to have 5 people alive and 1 dead than 5 dead and 1 alive, right? And those two signals compete, and they weigh against each other, and eventually out comes a decision. And I think that now that's one type of dilemma, right? And then we have our sort of broader social dilemma. I think that when it comes to dealing with people who are different from you, some people experience this as a dilemma. They say, I think it would be better if we all worked together and we got to know each other, but I also don't really completely trust you. And I'm a little bit afraid of you. And I'm even more afraid of your cousin who doesn't seem as nice as you, right? And that may be the kind of person who agrees to go to Seeds of Peace in Maine, where they have these conflicting emotions, where their part of them recognizes that we live in a better world if we all get to know each other and work together. But there are real fears, and they're afraid of the other person. They're afraid of what their own people will say. When I say, I just went to, if you're a Palestinian and you say, I just went to a summer camp where there were a bunch of Jews there, and your cousin, your parents might say, really? So you're becoming friends with the enemy, the people who just bombed our houses? That's terrible, right? So there's a combination of hope and fear, right? And for other people, there isn't a tension. They just have one feeling, which is I don't like them. Right? I love us and I don't like them. Right. So I think it's a different sort of psychological dynamic for different people. For people who are kind of more on the fence, having this cooperative experience can shift the balance, and they say, okay, you know, the amygdala gets turned down a little bit. You say it's not as scary, and the possible benefits of working together. Hey, we're getting points. We're doing well. We could go to a Red Sox game if we keep winning like this, right? That the positive experience sort of shifts the balance, I think, between those competing circuits. For the people who just have one feeling, which is I don't like them at all, and what's going on here, and you said quiz game, and now I'm talking to this person who I don't like. There, I think it's really working primarily just on the emotional channel and just making the other side seem like less of a snake, you know, less of a scary, dangerous thing. But it is all the same neural circuits, you know, that were involved in that early research with the dilemmas that you're referring to, and that's involved in our social feeling and reasoning more generally. So sorry, that's a very long answer, but that's how I sort of see these things as being connected.
Well, he might be much happier now. Yeah. Do you have any comments related to that part about? No. Okay, so I think we can open now for questions. I think the first thing I saw 3 hands. Yes, immediately. Actually, make it 4, 5. Yes, and only here. And 6 and 7. So you are giving me lots of work. And 8. And let's stop there just for a second. It's not I don't know how to count beyond 10, but. It's just to try to follow the order. Now, I'm going to ask the kind assistants. Oops. Yeah. So I think the first hand I saw here, I think perhaps Mike was here. So let's follow first row, second row, and then we go in that direction up there. So please.
Thank you very much. It was an awesome talk.
Oh, thank you.
I actually was listening to a podcast this morning, not a podcast, an Audible book this morning about signal and the noise.
Yeah.
And one of the things in it, they said that the different sides, so if you're like Democratic or Republican or conservative or liberal, if the more informed you are about a subject,
yeah,
the more you hold on to your view.
Yeah.
And the thing I found most fascinating about this tango game was that people accepted like a truth, ground truth.
Right.
I'm wondering whether that might, like, if you have a theory about that, and whether it might not be the fun element, but rather the distraction element, so that your cognitive load is taken up playing the game, and you can accept a truth much more easily than if you had your full cognitive resources available to think about it.
That's a very interesting hypothesis. It's not what I would have thought is going on. Instead, I think what's going on is you're playing a different game with different incentives, right? So the phenomenon that you're just describing is this finding from Dan Kahan and others that you might think that people who are, you know, who are more, let's say, who know more about politics, who have more information, they'll say, the world is more complicated and this is right and that's wrong, and have more nuanced views. But what you find is that the people who really know a lot are more likely to be partisan, right? And what's going on there is, I think, is they're playing, I don't mean to trivialize it, but they're playing a game in the sense that there's this conflict going on. And what gets them what they want is to have all the ammunition, just to have their talking points and to have their set of facts that support their side. So people who are smart and engaged will gather up their weapons, they'll gather up their ammunition, right? And they use it. So they're using their intelligence to fight this battle with the other person, right? Tango puts people into a different game. You don't win by showing that your opponent is wrong. You win and you get your points and you get your money and maybe you go to the baseball game if you and your partner can agree on the right answers, right? So you just have a different set of incentives there. That the set of incentives in real world discourse is to use your intelligence to have as much ammunition to fire at the opponent as possible. That's how you win. In Tango, you win by trying to work with the other person, to be kind and respectful, and to try to figure out, well, you think it's this and I think it's that. Okay, you know, I was wrong last time. Maybe you're right this time, right? And so I think that it is that people apply their intelligence to win the game, and that's the fundamental difference is the way the game is set up and the incentives that people have.
Very good, thank you. So we have 2 questions here, then we do Roberto, and then we follow the others, so please.
Hi. Well, you don't see me, but I'm down here.
Oh,
Yeah.
hello.
Thanks for your talk. I just have this very small question. You said that people that go to the seeds of peace already are concerned and are willing to find agreement. But what makes the difference with the people that wants to play this game? I mean,
so the nice thing about it is people who don't particularly want to play end up playing and having a good time. Like that's, to me, it's a big strength of the game. So when we did this at orientation, or we did this in this Fortune 500 company, we didn't select a group for people who said, who wants to play Tango? We just said, okay, it's orientation. You heard this talk from this professor, and now we're going to play this game. And it's just everyone who's there. Or at the corporate retreat, the person running the retreat just says, okay, well, there's this new game we're beta testing and we're going to try this out, right? And everyone just does it. So, part of the sort of strategy here is to have something that doesn't require any special motivation. Same with our online experiments. The people who signed up, all the Republicans and Democrats in those initial experiments, they weren't signing up for a peace mission. They were just, doing research studies for money, and they didn't know what they were going to get. So part of why we're excited about this is that people who have no special interest, I mean, some people love it and some people don't, but mostly people like it, even if they have no motivation, special motivation at the outset.
Very good, please.
Hi.
Hi.
So the question I have is related to the first question that was asked before, around like the beliefs you already have.
Yeah.
But more like in relation to people already have a set of beliefs, right? And with the amount of misinformation and disinformation that's going around, have you found that people are actually able to accept like an objective truth in certain questions, or is it a problem still?
Yeah. So we're pretty careful about this, where we try to pick the questions where people can bend without breaking. So like if you do Republicans and Democrats in the US and you say, who really won the 2020 election, right? Everybody knows that there's 2 sets of facts out there, right? And they know that the other side, the Trump people know that the liberals think that Trump lost, and the liberals know that the Trump people think that Trump won. And you can't, people are not going to bend on that because they already know that the other side has the wrong facts, right? So we try to do things that are surprising and interesting and challenging, but where people can accept the answer, right? So, Republicans might firmly believe that Trump was cheated and that he really won the 2020 election, but they don't know what percentage of crimes are committed by, immigrants versus not. They're surprised, but they're willing to accept it. The other thing is that we don't start out with the politics. We start out with country music and Stranger Things, and we get people working together. And so by the time they get those more challenging questions, they've already established a rapport. They already have a sense of teamwork, that they like each other and that they work well together. And they don't want to ruin that by being a jerk about, they might say, I disagree, but they don't say you're an idiot and you're wrong. And I'm not going to, there's no way I'll agree to that. So, that's kind of how we do it, is we try to create an on-ramp, that's nice and smooth, where we start people off with something that's easy, and then work our way up, and never push people to go farther than they're willing to go.
Very good, please.
Thank you. Thanks very much. I've got 2 questions, overarching questions,
which are very brief.
Very brief. So the first one is, how many Trump's tweets are necessary for all the results obtained in Tango to fail?
Yeah.
Second question is, I'm worried about structural problem that is underlying this idea of bringing people together to help to be harmonized. We live in a time of polycrisis. We have a more and more unequal world. We have a genocide ongoing. And how do you ask people, for example, if you want to do this in Israel with, let's say, with Jewish Arab, with Arab Israelis, if you want to ask them, I mean, you got your family killed and your house destroyed, but you should really get along better with those guys.
Right.
And they're like, I don't see that happening, to be honest.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, those are great questions. So the first question is more straightforward. I mean, we haven't, titrated with Trump tweets, but we do look over time, right? And so the idea is that 4 months after playing the game, people are likely to have heard a lot of, political content, mostly from people they already agree with and from news sources that they're sympathetic to. And we still see, an effect later. So the question is, how many Trump tweets or how many, AOC tweets or whatever can this withstand? At least 4 months worth. And then it can be repeated. Your other question, I think, is a really important one. And I get this reaction often, or this set of questions often from people who are more on the left, and particularly about Israel. I think that, and this is kind of related to the other question, the game needs to be calibrated to the context. So I don't think that, someone who's living in Gaza and whose, home was destroyed, that it would be productive to say, hey, come play a game with some Israelis. I think that's too much to ask of people. Where we're using the game in Israel is with people who are Arabs and Jews who are already living in Israel, and it's a matter of everyday life. And the Arabs who live in Israel have very complicated feelings about, they hate what's happening in Gaza and the West Bank, and they feel deep solidarity with the people who most recently have been killed. And at the same time, they're not often very supportive of Hamas, right? Hamas killed Arabs along with Jews in October of 2023. And they're afraid to speak up, but they also recognize that in many ways their life in Israel is better than it might be in other countries in the Middle East. And so their feelings are varied, and their feelings are very, very, very complicated. And there's a lot of segregation, but in some places there's more mixing. So, for example, Haifa is probably the most integrated city in Israel. And at the University of Haifa, there are a lot of Arab and Muslim students. And they tend to self-segregate, but of course they do mix with each other in classes. And there is a real desire on both sides to have more productive engagement, right? So on a university campus like University of Haifa, where people are already there together and they're trying to get on with their lives and they're trying to live, there can be an appetite for that. But, they don't want to be lectured, right? And I think, as we're thinking about how to develop the game, the massive asymmetry between the Jews and the Arabs is really important, right? So in the United States, in our game there, we basically try to have it so, okay, sometimes the conservatives are right, sometimes the liberals are right, and both people kind of get humbled, right? It might not make as much sense for the Arabs to be humbled in that context, right? And so it might be better to have questions that are more about shared knowledge, right? We both know things about this football team or this music or this food, right? Or shared ignorance. We were both surprised to learn this thing. So part of what we're figuring out is how do you get the content appropriate to the context so that it feels like something constructive for everybody. And I think that's not an easy thing to do. And that's something, that we're learning. And, we're working with with partners, including, our Arab Muslim collaborators, to try to figure out like what would make this a constructive experience. And there may be, there are people who are not ready to play any kind of game, and that would be kind of insulting to sort of ask them to. But there are people who could be engaged by the right kind of game, and that's what we're looking for to start.
Yeah, very good. Thank you. So, May, please.
Hello. Thank you so much for your presentation. It was really interesting. My interest probably relates to everyone else's question as well. And first of all, what I want to mention is that in the beginning of your presentation, you were talking about comparing the quality of democracy across the world, and I find that it's a little bit unfair to sort of compare and rank the quality of democracy in the world, because a lot of countries are sort of diverse in a way that because they are emerging, and there is a lot of a history of colonization,
right.
And to really sort of impose our values on these countries is sort of, I felt a little bit unfair to compare. Right. That's one point. And another point is that I think some of them also mentioned about this, maybe some related questions. I'm interested in the work of Lucas, and he did a lot of analysis, panel data analysis on democracy, and how do you also include sort of like an epistemic dimension? How the knowledge is being the side of the knowledge creations and knowledge transferring the knowledge itself. And do you just consider diversity as a diversity of ethnicity, or diversity as sort of worldviews? Diversity of how maybe we might have different ethnicities, but we might have certain worldviews. So how do you treat, in your research, in Lucas' research, how do you treat these epistemic dimensions of how people view the world itself? Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thanks for your thoughts and your question there. So there's a lot there. In terms of sort of our democracy outcome measures, I think the first thing to say is this is not an assessment of how wise or smart or good people are in different countries. It is an assessment of the functioning of political systems, right? And you can have very, wonderful, intelligent, good people who are living with a bad system, and you can have people who are living with a very good system, but as individuals, they are not particularly moral or admirable or smart, right? So it's not a value judgment about people's worth, right? There is an assessment, right? And a lot goes into these democracy assessments, but it's things like, is there corruption? Are judges and being bribed? Is there what in the US we call gerrymandering? So that is changing the political districts so that the leaders get to choose their voters instead of the voters choosing their leaders, right? And these are things that are incompatible with the stated purpose and the design of democracy, right? So it's a kind of internal critique from the democratic perspective. Are things functioning the way that they are supposed to function? Then there's a value judgment, a question of like, well, is democracy good, right? I mean, if most countries are either fairly democratic or they pretend to be, even if they're not, right? But there are some places, some countries where people say we don't want democracy, right? And it's not for me to say, to tell them, well, you're wrong morally. What I can say is, in democracies, people tend to be happier, they tend to be wealthier, they tend to have better healthcare and things like that. But that you have to decide for yourself what you care about. So we're not making value judgments about ultimate values of what humans should want out of life, or value judgments in terms of who are good people or who are smart people. But these are assessments of how political systems are functioning, and are they functioning the way they're advertised as functioning. I wasn't sure I completely understood your second question about the epistemics. Was that a question about like, where does the quiz content come from? Like, where do the questions come from? Or I don't know if you could clarify.
Not the quiz. It's not the quiz. It's in the beginning you were talking about the research work, as like evaluating how democracy have shifted over time, and that diversity have also like shifted. And I was wondering how you are including the sort of how information system media have changes over time. Have you also included this kind of information system in the research itself?
So we're taking data sets that already exist. So, demographers have said, okay, this is the population of this country, and it's this percentage of this group and this percentage of that group. And then historians and sociologists can look at this and they can say, okay, in this country, this group is historically dominant, and it's usually pretty clear cut. Like in South Africa, the historically dominant group are the white colonists, and the indigenous Black people have been historically not dominant, except until if you go much farther back. So it's taking data sets that are aiming to sort of provide just sort of basic, demographic and really sort of political information that doesn't require a lot of value judgment. And then most of the kind of added value of the research is in putting all the data together and asking the right questions and then doing the fancy math that Lucas does to come out with these answers. So we try to make as few assumptions as possible and use judgments that other people have made and judgments that are considered to be relatively uncontroversial in kind of generating the data that goes into the analysis.
Thank you so much. Now we are coming to that sad moment that we are coming close to the end. So what I'm going to suggest is that IQS faculty who will have later an opportunity to speak with Professor Greene, that postpone their questions. Also our PhD students who will have an opportunity as well. But I have seen two hands here. I think she over there, yeah, she raised your hand. I think you raised your hand. So what I'm going to suggest is that you all put your questions as brief as possible, and then you can choose. That's within the time we have. Resources are limited. Yeah, I think we talked about that today. So and then you also raised your hand, and he also raised his hand. So if you could starting with you, so we go to the final questions and a final answer. Yes, please. Oh, she doesn't have a microphone. Yeah, so she might need. Yeah,
My question is very quick, I think. I noticed that in the game, you mostly focused on younger demographics, especially students. And obviously there are the people who are working together and stuff. But I was just wondering, would you expand your focus on the more elderly or middle-aged people? Or do you think that's a challenge because they are more likely to stick to their guns and not change their opinions that easily? That's just my question.
Yeah, she's thinking about her parents probably. Yeah. But yeah, so please. Yeah. So all the questions, yes.
Yeah, so I have two very quick questions. The first one is, I think you said that the pop culture questions are important to get the effect, but have you tested that experimentally? Yeah. And also, do you have plans for translating and adapting this game to other languages and cultures? The bottom line is I would be very interested in that, and even helping if that is possible. But
yeah. Great. Very good. So please.
So my question is that maybe this project may also work in other countries, but education is also a crucial factor. And if we're not educated since little to like debate or think open-minded, maybe it's difficult to actually arrive to this point to talk with other people with other ideologies. So I don't know. I'm maybe just considering that maybe there has to be a change on our educational system. Yeah. And also there's like each year the budget is decreasing. So yeah, it's just.
Yeah, no, very clear. Yeah. And there was the last one. I don't know who has raised. No?
I think I can do all these quickly and maybe I'll have time for more.
Oh, please. Yeah.
So older versus younger. This is something, especially in the workplace we've talked to, that people feel like there's a generational divide. And, we have done it in our online games with Republicans and Democrats. That's a whole range of ages. At colleges, it's young people. But in the workplace, it's a mix. And the game seems to work for people who are older and younger. And we especially want to have questions where, older people are more likely to get some questions and younger people are more likely to get others. And so you get that intergenerational cooperational component. To answer your questions, we suspect that easing people in with the pop culture helps, but we haven't explicitly tested that. And in terms of adapting it for Spain or other places, I'd be delighted to talk to you about that. This is one of my interests in speaking lots of places about this, is to collect, ideas for ways to expand. And then your point about education, I think you're absolutely right. The game can't do everything. I think one thing that's good about it is that you don't need a lot coming in. I mean, if someone just says, hey, want to play a quiz game, it's about, TV shows and food and things like that to start, that's pretty much easy for anybody. So I think anyone can participate and enjoy it and, know some things, but I view the game as a sort of entryway into sort of, deeper dialogue. In terms of resources, one nice thing about the game is that, you can play it for free. I mean, once the software exists, we can, all you need is just a link and people can play. So it's a very cheap way to reach people, but, resources could certainly do more. So thanks. Those are all great questions. Yeah.
Yes. So just to conclude, it seems there's one question over there at the end.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Person in red, please.
Yeah, that I found it very interesting. Well, in the graph comparing democracy with diversity, that the results looked a bit inconclusive in a way that sometimes the effect was positive and then it was negative and then positive again in looking at decades of progression. So I wanted to know if you could give us a clear conclusion, or at least if our objective was to get as a country as democratic as possible, what would be an optimal combination of factors that you would think that would help for a more democratic country in this context?
Yeah. Well, so I think that my view is we did the analysis over time with the 90 countries over 6 decades to try to answer that question, and our tentative conclusion is that diversity in the long run can strengthen democracies, but there's a kind of painful growing pains, period. And it's possible for, the democracy to collapse during that time. So we don't want to assume that everything always works out, because that's not necessarily the case. What makes things work out? I mean, this is coming back to sort of the background theory, which is that when people are more integrated economically and culturally, when people depend on each other across lines of division, different races, different religions, different cultures, that I think it's that interdependence, it's that cooperation in ways that are, explicit, like we work together in a business, or ways that are more subtle, where we, just coordinate with each other in traffic and on the street, and, just live peacefully together. We don't attack each other, right? That cooperative experience is what knits a nation together. That's at least the hypothesis. I hope that answers the question, or at least addresses it.
Okay, so we are getting to the end. I think for some of us, it was a very short session, so I'm sure that there was much more to discuss. I understand that for some students, staying in a 2-hour intense discussion, lots of information, was a real challenging experience, but I think most of you have done brilliantly well. I also want to mention here that we have colleagues from, apart from, or in addition, I should say, of Blanquerna, we have colleagues from ESADE, we have colleagues from La Salle, we have colleagues from University of Barcelona, of Autónoma, of Pompeu. And then I think it will be really exciting to tango with all of them.
Yep.
And we should invite them, people who we know that are here today, and we might not have time now to speak with all of you. We are going to write to you, see whether we can tango all together, and take advantage of that. Now, I told you so. It was really exciting. Lots of stuff to think about. So I think the only thing that remains to be done is just thank Professor Greene again. Thank you so much.
Thank you.